Hey guys, Phil here. Just going to do a calibration explanation of Orcaslicer settings for my little K10 here. Everyone keeps asking about for it, so I'm just going to run through my Orcaslicer settings, exactly how they work, and what I get my best prints from. So I'm just going to pop over to the computer and show you how I set it all up, and we'll go from there. Enjoy. So here I am in my Orcaslicer profile for my K10. The basic idea on the left hand side with my K10, I basically have this all set up, printable height 100, size is 100, 100, and it's rectangular, and we set our 0 point from bottom left, which on the printer is essentially front left. We got our Marlin Legacy is our G-code flavor. In our machine G-code, I essentially have a intro line being printed on the left to right at the front, and that's done by this little bit of code here. I'll share this in the comments. You can drop this in the machine code if you like. This essentially just puts a prime line down. So if I drop a model in here of any kind, let's just go a handy model, let's just put a benchy in here. If I hit slice, you'll see on the front left, just here, we have a prime line that gets done before it goes and starts our print. Next part is the other thing we need to do as well is inner motion ability. This is my settings here. Maximum accelerations, none of this really matters too much because we do that all in our actual print settings. The only thing that is important is just to set the maximum jerk to 5, 5, 0.4 and 5. This just means that if you accidentally set the jerk settings too high in the speed, it'll override and put them here. Make sure that emits to G-code is switched on. The next part is our filament. So this is just based off the filament profile in that easythreed has sent through. If you use their original, there's some retraction limitations set in here. I like to turn this off so that it's just derived by the printer settings. I've found with the generic PLA on this printer, on the K10, anything around the 200 to 205 is good. Obviously the smooth PEI plate doesn't matter at all. First layer, you can set this at 0 and 0. It doesn't actually matter because the K10 does not have a heated bed, and I always set my maximum volumetric speed to 8. That will override any of the settings that happen in here to make sure that it doesn't ever go over what I've found to be the maximum printing volumetric speed that can be allowed for filament out of this extruder. So 8 is even probably higher than what it actually does in real life. It's probably only ever going to about 5 or 6, but that's alright. When it comes to retraction settings, so if we go into our printer settings and go to retraction, I set mine at 4.5. Additional length on restart, I've got 0.05. This is just set so that when it does a retraction and move, before it starts its next bit of filament travel, it will extrude the tiniest little bit of filament, or at least it essentially just primes the nozzle after doing that retraction. Retraction speed I've got set at 40. Maybe you can adjust this slightly, but due to the size and torque of the motor that they use in the extruder, I found that 40 is the fastest I can get consistent prints of retraction that doesn't overload that little printer. You can put it up to 100, and essentially what it'll do is it'll skip steps. You'll hear a click, 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 click as it tries to retract. This basically means it's doing nothing. So I've done a few retraction towers and things to adjust this to make that work. Travel threshold for retraction I set as 1mm. Retraction on layer change, retract on top layer as well. We also do Z-hop. I've got my Z-hop height. I've found that 0.6 is enough, that even if your first layer doesn't go down perfectly and you get a few bulges, it still won't catch the troubles. If everything is absolutely perfect, it actually prints nicer without Z-hop on, but if it happens to over extrude slightly or under extrude slightly, you don't want the nozzle to catch on top of the already printed filament as it tries to move. So 0.6 seems to work pretty well, and it will go on a slight angle, slope up. You can set it to spiral so it moves up first, but I've found slope works the best. Switching material doesn't matter because that's not what we're doing. So that's okay. Next thing, we go into our print settings. You can print up to 0.3 of a millimeter of layer height on this thing, but you need to make sure that you slow that, slow your or keep your printing speed quite low, because this extruder doesn't like to push that much filament out. I found the happy medium to be 0.16 or 0.2. Same thing with the first layer height. I go 0.2, but you could potentially go a little bit taller just to adjust for any discrepancies that you have in your print bed. So 0.2 or 0.25 seems to be a really nice initial amount. Layer widths, you can set these. I think these are actually just the defaults that are in Orcaslicer to start with. I haven't found I needed to change any of these. But basically, if you find you're getting some under extrusion on the outer wall, you can increase this. If you want a stronger inner wall, you can increase this or decrease this, and so on. Aligned for your seam position, or these is nearest. So if we hit slice, this is essentially just saying where it's going to put its seam, so where it steps up. So see these little white dots here? That's set on nearest, which is just, if I go to aligned and I hit slice plate, you'll see that they will all move to the back. So they're all in a nice line. If you set it to back, it will go and put it where it thinks where it thinks the back of the print is. So this is the front of our print bed. It thinks that we want this side to be the nicest print, so it's going to always put it on the back. So this can actually be really, really nice if we just rotate this so that it is sitting sort of 90 degrees to the front, and then we hit slice again. It will put all those seams directly on the back, and this is actually a really good option in a lot of cases. And then random is just basically, if you don't want to have a set seam line anywhere, you'll end up with these little dots, potentially if it slightly over extrudes when it does its step up, but it can also be a very good option when you do your printing. Anyway, I'll put it back on a line because I just find that it gives a nice result, but results may vary based on how you do things. Seam gap 10%, scarf joint. I don't like scarf joints on this thing just because it doesn't have the accuracy to be able the printer to do a perfect, beautiful seam scarf joint. On my bigger printers and my sort of more advanced printers, scarf joints worked really, really well to get rid of those join lines, but as it's set here, it seems to work really nice. The resolution, I always tend to drop mine down to 0.8. I think default is 0.12. Don't think it really matters too much. I just got suggested to do that by someone, and it seems to work quite nicely. Elephant foot compensation. So that's this, like when you first, your first layer goes down, you'll end up with a slight step in this first layer. So you can see this light blue line where the model actually is. I've got it 0.2 mil reduced because I know that to get a nice first layer on this printer, I have to set it slightly lower than what's ideal. So if I go up 1 or 2 layers in here, so you'll see that it moves out before you see that step at the bottom between this and this. That's essentially a 0.25 mil step. Seems to work quite nicely, and it allows for any of your flexible prints to still have that little bit of gap between the 2 first layers. So This again, it's completely up to how you would like to set your printer up, and results may vary. Precise wall, precise Z height. I don't know if it makes a massive difference, but I seem to get a nicer print when I have these two on. I don't use ironing on this, just purely because of how long the prints take. Doing an ironing layer, it slows it right down to maybe 10 millimeters per second, and on the top layers, and it's just really not. I don't find the results are super awesome. Arcane, I don't know how to say this, but you can have this on classic or arcane. Alright, Archen. You guys can tell me in the comments what that's actually meant, how that's pronounced. This is all just set on default, classic or arcane. I don't know. It's not a spider, so that's fine. Inner, outer, this is all set to default. Bridge flow set to default, and I just set it to extra perimeters on overhang. I turn off detect overhang walls because with that switched on, it sometimes treats bridge layers as if they are printing onto support, and just doesn't do a proper bridge. So I've found that detect overhang walls off is it seems to work better. Strength, this is all up to you guys, of course. This is my default. I adjust this on every print basically. So 3, 3, and 3, meaning that we've got a solid 3 layer surface the whole way around the outside of the print. Infill density, you get most of your strength in a print from the outside walls, realistically, especially with something small like this. So if I hit slice plate and we drop down through the layers, you'll see this infill in here is set at 5%. If I drop that up to 25, which is what a lot of people suggest for their more structural prints, it goes much tighter, much more dense, but it obviously affects our print time by a significant amount. If you're printing something that is dimensionally, needs to be strong in all three axes, I suggest using cubic, because it's essentially drawing cubes on a 45-degree angle in both axes, so that you get side pressure, top pressure, and back pressure is all the same support amount, and that tends to work extremely well for anything that needs that additional support. But when I put this down on 5% on cubic, you don't really get much in the way of internal support, which is why I use the 2D lattice. This is fairly pointless as a support, in my opinion. A lot of people also use gyroid. Gyroid works perfectly fine, but I do find it takes a long time to print gyroid on this printer, because it's having to do very complex sort of curves on every support layer. Whereas if I use the 2D lattice, it's just drawing straight lines. So the less that this printer needs to do direction changes, the better, due to just the way the motors work. Nothing else is really that important on our strength tab. We drop into the speed tab. We will have first layer. I always have mine set to 20 millisecond. Seems to lay down really nicely. And the infill layer can go to 30. And then I just sit everything else I run at 40 millimeters per second on this printer with PLA. Just seems to print really nicely. And I set travel to 40 as well. Acceleration 350 across the board. Because essentially this is all getting controlled by this jerk setting. So that initial jerk setting, most printers will have this set as 9 or 10 or something like that. Basically just changes the amount of acceleration change on first movement. At least that's how my understanding works, and that's how it works in the CNC world as well. So 2 or 3 seems to be extremely good on this printer. it slows that down, initial change of angle down or change of speed down slightly, but then allows it to do the acceleration from there. The only issue I've found with having the jerk set up higher, say 5, 6, 7, is that you start to get layer shifts, especially after like a long travel move and then a stop and start in an opposite direction. So like coming across here and then like a sudden curve or sudden turn, it doesn't like it very much at all. So jerk, I think even if you have everything set as complete default and you set your jerk down to 2, you'll probably actually get really good results. Extrusion smoothing, again, I found that with these acceleration settings and speeds, just as we come, say as it comes along this line, kicks in and goes around the corner, I was getting a slight under extrusion as it finished a turn. And this extrusion smoothing seemed to adjust for that. Supports. In our supports, realistically, the only thing that matters at all in this entire thing to me is what type of support, whether I need to paint them on or whether they exist already, and the Z-top offset. So I set my Z-top offset to 2.8 as an absolute minimum on this printer. Sometimes I go right up to 3.5 or 3.2 depending on how it's printing. Essentially, let's change this model and we'll change it to something that has I don't know, has a need for, or even if we just do this, undo that, and go back to here. If we move this in this axis and we slice the plate with it sitting up off the bed, this will generate supports underneath. Alright, it's moved it down onto the bed for me. I did not want it to do that. Let's rotate it so that we've got a bottom surface here that's going to want us to try and support. So that Z-top offset is essentially the difference between this surface here, that green surface there, and our actual print. So if I change this to 0, for example, and I print again, it might be a little bit hard to see, but essentially you can see that it has no surface break between these 2 points, and so you end up with not a very nice surface. When you try and remove the supports, it's likely that these 2 bits of filament have fused together and it won't allow you to remove them. But I find if I use 3.2 or 2.8 on the K10, I get nice removal between these 2 surfaces. So between those 2 surfaces, we end up with a nice removable surface. So that's quite nice. I think, yeah, this results may vary with this sort of stuff. It's very, supports are very much a suck it and see kind of situation. So you guys can try it out yourself, see how it looks. All right, let's go multi-material, doesn't matter at all. And in others, I think I turn off, the default has a Brim, and it also has a raft. Now, I can't remember where the raft settings are. Basically, I don't have any Brim usually. I only put a Brim on if I absolutely need it for larger prints where you've got a big flat surface and the PLA, or I've printed in PETG on this on the K10 is likely to lift. Skirt loops, don't need that. Because I'm using a priming line. If you're not going to use a priming line, if you use skirt loops, you can have it so it does these 2 little priming lines around the outside of the print. Totally up to you guys if you want to do that. It's probably not a bad idea. Outside of that, that's basically my entire idea. If we go to raft, where is raft? Okay, they're in support under this thing. So if you put a raft on, which is essentially what it has as a default, you end up with this sort of surface here. Let me see if I can zoom in on it. These lines in here, and what that does is essentially takes up any discrepancy in your print bed, and they do that with the K10. If you're not using the builder's tape or something else to create a flat surface on that print bed, and you're just using the magnetic one as it comes with the little dots in it, that's designed to be used with the raft. And essentially you print with the raft, and the raft stays on the bed when you try and pull the model off, and you can get reasonable bottom surfaces, but I don't particularly like it. It doesn't seem to work very well for me. I'd much rather just use builder's tape, like you'll see in my time-lapse videos, just holding it all nice and flat. But that's the entirety of my Orcaslicer settings. As you can see from my time lapses, I seem to get pretty consistent prints out of it. I might throw a time lapse on the end of this just so you guys can see a print happening. And I hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for watching. Please do all the YouTube things if you can be bothered. Like, subscribe, comment. I'd love to hear your opinions on the settings, basically what works for you, what doesn't work for you. I know there's people that use Orcaslicer, people that use the EasyWare that comes with the printer, and yeah, this is what I seem to get to work the best. So enjoy. Thanks.